sun's thunder echo like the crack of doom, while they rend your skies asunder. Fallout makes the world a tomb. Do you want your homes to tumble, rise like smoke towards the sky? Will you let your cities crumble? Will you see your children die? Men and women, stand together. Do not heed the men of war. Make your minds up now or never. Ban the bomb forevermore. Tell the leaders of the nations, make the whole wide world take heed. Poison from the radiations strikes at every race and creed. Must you put mankind in danger, murder folk in foreign lands? Will you bring death to a stranger, have his blood upon your hands? Stand together, men and women, do not heed the men of war. Make your minds up now or never, ban the bomb forevermore. Shall we lay the world in ruin? Only you can make the choice. Stop and think of what you're doing. Join the march and raise your voice. Time is short, we must be speedy. We can see the hungry filled. Harm the homeless, help the needy. Shall we blast or shall we build? Men and women, stand together. Do not heed the men of war. Make your minds up now or never. Ban the bomb forevermore.
Hello everyone and welcome to London CND's Hiroshima Day Commemoration. My name's Carol Turner, I'm chair of London CND. At 8 o'clock, just after, 75 years ago today, the first atom bomb was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, 9th of August 1945, a second bomb devastated Nagasaki. The United States is the only country ever to have used nuclear weapons in war. First, second, and even third generation Hibakusha, the survivors, are still living with the terrible physical and mental health consequences of that. Those of you who've joined us before in Tavistock Square Peace Gardens will know that we always kick off with music. So it's great to have Hugh Goodacre here with us. Hugh's a university lecturer, CND supporter, as well as an amateur musician. In fact, he tells me that his union branch always ends with a song from him. So thank you very much, Hugh, for that lovely traditional opening. So now I'm going to hand you over to Jenny Jones. Baroness Jenny Jones of the Green Party is a former Deputy Mayor of London and Vice President of London CND. So thank you, Jenny, over to you.
Thank you very much, Carol, and it's an absolute honour and a pleasure to be speaking to everybody today and to be introducing such a talented group of CND supporters. As Carol explained, today is the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, and it's an important day for us because it represents more than half a century of CND campaigning. Now, there have been comparisons this week with the explosions in Beirut. People have been comparing them with Hiroshima. But for me, there are two huge distinctions, apart from the fact that they were both huge tragedies. The bombing of Hiroshima was very different. First of all, the scale. In Hiroshima, something like 70,000 people were killed within the first few seconds. And then, of course, there were tens of thousands killed later through radiation poisoning, and as Carol said, people still suffering from those awful effects. And the second difference is that the bombing of Japan, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was deliberate. It was an act of war, an act of aggression. And unlike the explosions in Beirut, which we assume was incompetence and corruption, this was a deliberate attempt by a country to actually kill a lot of inhabitants who were not necessarily engaged in the war. Hiroshima wasn't a strategic site. It was actually one of 4 towns selected because, in fact, they had not been, or they were relatively untouched from the war. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the 2 incredibly unlucky towns. Now, we in CND have been challenging the whole idea of the further use of atomic bombs since 1957. I'm a latecomer. I didn't go on my first CND march until 1968. And quite honestly, I would not have believed that more than 50 years later, we are still saying an obvious truth that we have to stop military use of weapons of mass destruction. And quite honestly, we have to continue. And today is a reminder of that. And so thank you all for listening. And I very much hope that we will all keep up our cheerful sides, even through what is actually an epic struggle on our part. Now, I'm going to introduce Maryam Eslamdoust. I'm sure many of you know her anyway, Mayor of Camden, and she has joined us on previous occasions. So, Maryam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. 75 years ago today, an atom bomb unleashed unprecedented destruction in the world. The horrors suffered by the people of Hiroshima should have been an immediate lesson for the world not to repeat. But within days, the people of Nagasaki were subjected to the same horror. And the world, within a few years, entered the madness of a nuclear arms race. 75 years on, it is only by luck and miracles that we've not seen further nuclear genocide. For the next 75 years, we cannot risk humanity's survival being reliant on these miracles and luck. So we must reaffirm our commitment today to nuclear disarmament and a nuclear-free world, starting here in Britain. Thank you.
Maryam, thank you very much indeed. It's important words coming from you. And now I'm going to introduce Bruce Kent. I'm assuming nobody needs my introduction for him, but he is Vice President of London CND, and he's also Vice President of the National CND. So Bruce, please.
Thank you very much. It's a very unusual Hiroshima Day for all of us. So many times I've come to Tavistock Square to remember the awful events taking place in Japan in 1945. We were told very often, we're still told, that it was the only way to end the war. It's absolute nonsense. There were negotiations with the Japanese leadership, and all they wanted was security for the emperor, who is semi-divine. That's exactly what we gave them after the bombs were dropped. So the idea that they were essential is nonsense. We've made some progress in getting rid of destructive weaponry, but actually we're now in a worse situation than we were in 1945. The weapons of today make global destruction by accident or by design perfectly possible. Our predecessors have tried to find new ways. The League of Nations was a brave but inadequate effort, but it gave birth to the United Nations in 1945. Yet few people now, even in schools, have ever seen the United Nations Charter. The preamble to that charter starts with a wonderful phrase. Our task, it says, is to free the world from the scourge of war. Scourge of war. We've perhaps made some progress in some areas: human rights, economic justice, care for migrants and refugees, and even we have a working international court. Militarism and war are deeply into our culture. nuclear weapons are still thought of and talked about as instruments of peace. But at the moment, we are spending over 200 billion on more of them, on a system which in the United Kingdom is totally dependent on the goodwill of the United States supplies the missiles. We now need only 10 other endorsements from countries to make the ICAN Nuclear Weapon Abolition Treaty legally binding. 10 more. But who knows about that? We've got so much work to do. Anyway, enough from me. It's a pleasure to greet so many from Camden and so many peace groups, national and international. Working together internationally for peace has to be the key to any real progress. Finally, a word of special welcome to Jeremy Corbyn, an old friend and a good and honest politician, but also a bit of a visionary and a prophet. Thank you, Jeremy. Anyway, greetings to you all, wherever you are, and let's all get together and do some more peace work. Bye.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's always good to have your historic perception of this, perspective of this, as well as, of course, your current hard work. It's fantastic. We're going to hear next from Michael Mears. He is an actor and a playwright. You can see a few extracts from The Mistake, his postponed theatre play about the bombing of Hiroshima, and that's on YouTube. And this evening, please don't forget, you can watch his adaptation of a survivor's account of Hiroshima, live streamed from the Sands Film Studios Theatre. Thank you. Michael, over to you.
When we reach the bridge, we see that the whole community on the opposite side of the river is a sheet of fire. We dare not cross. And so decide to take refuge in Asano Park, off to our left. We walk through the park, along the river, and settle down in some underbrush. The silence in that bamboo grove by the river, where there are so many hundreds of gruesomely wounded suffering together, is one of the most dreadful phenomena of my whole experience. The ones who are injured are quiet. No one weeps, much less screams in pain. No one complains. None of the many who die do so noisily. Not even the children cry. Very few people even speak. When I give water to some whose faces have been almost blotted out by flash burns, they take their share, then raise themselves a little and bow to me in thanks. The Reverend Tanimoto, a friend of ours, is also in the park and greets us. He is looking for a boat in which he might carry some of the most severely injured across the river, away from the spreading fire. He finds a good-sized pleasure punt on the bank and can pack 10 or 12 people into the boat for each crossing. Later that evening, he excitedly asks us to help him rescue 2 children he's seen standing up to their shoulders in the river. So a group goes out, picks them up, then stretches them out on the ground next to me. 2 young girls who have lost their family and are both badly burned. It's a hot night, and it seems even hotter because of the fires against the sky. But the younger of the 2 girls complains that she is cold. I cover her with my jacket. She and her older sister had been in the salt water of the river for 2 hours before being rescued. The younger one has huge, raw flash burns on her body. The salt water must have been excruciatingly painful to her. Now, She begins to shiver heavily and again says that she feels cold. So I borrow a blanket from someone nearby and wrap her up. But she shakes more and more, saying again, "I'm so cold." Then suddenly she stops shivering and is dead. Reverend Tanimoto has a moment of blind, murderous rage, crying, "Why don't the doctors come to help these people?" We learn later the answer to this question. Of 150 doctors in the city, 65 were already dead, and most of the rest were wounded. Of nearly 1,800 nurses, over 1,600 were dead or too badly hurt to work. This is why so many citizens who were injured went untended, and why so many who might have lived died.
Michael, thank you. That was very vivid. Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear from Shigeo Kobayashi, who is in fact a member of Japanese Against Nuclear, a London-based group which campaigns against nuclear weapons and nuclear power. And each year on Hiroshima Day, the mayor of Hiroshima reads a peace message to thousands of people who gather in the city's Peace Stadium. And Shigeo will read an extract from the English translation. Thank you so much, Shigeo.
Thank you. This speech by Mayor of Hiroshima, whose name is Kazumi Matsui, did give this speech on 8 o'clock in the morning today, Japan times. And I managed to get a copy of the speech in English early hours of today here, 1 o'clock. So his Peace Declaration 2020 goes like this. On August 6, 1945, a single atomic bomb destroyed our city. Rumor at that time had it that nothing will grow here for 75 years. And yet, Hiroshima recovered, becoming a symbol of peace, visited by millions from around the world. Humanity struggles now against a new threat, a novel coronavirus. However, with what we have learned from the tragedies of the past, we should be able to overcome this threat. When 1918 flu pandemic attacked a century ago, it took tens of millions of lives and terrorized the world because nations fighting World War I were unable to meet the threat together. A subsequent upsurge in nationalism led to World War II and atomic bombings. Last November, when Pope Francis visited our city, he left us with a powerful message to remember, to journey together, to protect. These are three moral imperatives. Turning to the United Nations, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, which went into effect 50 years ago, and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, adopted 3 years ago, are both critical to eliminating nuclear weapons. They comprise a framework that we must pass on to future generations, yet their future is opaque. Now, more than ever, world leaders must strengthen their determination to make this framework function effectively, to enhance its role as a mediator between the nuclear weapon and non-nuclear weapon states. I ask the Japanese government to heed the appeal of the Hibakusha that it sign and ratify and become a party to a TPNW. As the only nation to suffer a nuclear attack, Japan must persuade the global public to unite with the spirit of Hiroshima. I further demand more generous assistance for the Hibakusha whose average age exceeds 83, and the many others whose daily lives are still plagued by suffering due to the harmful effect of radiation on their mind and bodies. And once more, I demand a political decision to expand the Black Rain areas. At the Peace Memorial Ceremony, making 75 years since the bombing, we offer heartfelt prayers for peaceful repose of the souls of atomic bomb victims. Together with Nagasaki and like-minded people around the world, we pledge to do everything in our power to abolish nuclear weapon and open the path to genuine and lasting world peace. This is the end of his declaration. This year, number of attendants are limited just over 800, not 8,000. So 10% of people came. Okay, that's it.
Shigeo, thank you very much indeed. And please send our greetings to Kazumi Kashui. It's very good to hear from him and from the Hibakusha. Thank you. We're now going to go to Emma Dent Coad, and Emma was MP for Kensington, and she is currently a vice chair of London CND. She is an outspoken opponent of war and nuclear weapons, but also probably best known as a Grenfell campaigner. She is going to read some poems of her own choice. So Emma, please, your poems.
Thank you, Jenny. I've been a peace campaigner for many, many years, and purely by chance, I found an essay that I wrote 49 years ago when I was at school, about war, for which I got 8 out of 10. So I was quite pleased about that, and I could see a lot of my early ideas about against war from when I was 16 years old. So yes, I'm going to read 2 poems. One is about an very elderly person who passed away, and one about a child. And the first one was written by Anthony Owen, who was a Marine in the US Army, who had traveled around Japan after the bomb as part of the observation and reconstruction that they were involved in. So this is The Last Fair Collector of Hiroshima. Her fingers in the jelly of yen, her skin one with the standard issue fare bag, a dove in the sun of silver to go to the mountains. Oh, if only she went. I've read of a woman who cooled her burns with figs and persimmon. She pared away old skin for years. It was the finest paper, writing its kanji into the papyrus sky. I wish I knew her. In the ritual of tea making, I learnt how to sip from a widow's eyes, and learnt that some stories are like Hiroshima streetcars. They always arrive on time, then the hour takes them. They found her omen in the evening crow, hopping by the river. It's time to see how atoms rise when another survivor dies. Their story closes with their eyelids. I have read of a God-fearing woman who feared man so much more. She sliced a cucumber each night for years to cool her skin. Hate had left her years ago, with 5 generations of fishermen, horsebreakers, librarians, mothers, fathers, fur collector. My second poem will probably be familiar to many people. It's written by the Turkish poet Nazim Hikmet, who was an activist and spent a lot of time in prison. His poetry inspired a generation of anti-war songs, particularly in the 60s. And this is Hiroshima Child. I come and stand at every door, but none can hear my silent tread. I knock and yet remain unseen, for I am dead, for I'm dead. I'm only 7, though I died in Hiroshima long ago. I'm 7 now, as I was then. When children die, they do not grow. My hair was scorched by swirling flame. My eyes grew dim, my eyes grew blind. Death came and turned my bones to dust, and that was scattered by the wind. I need no fruit, I need no rice, I need no sweets, not even bread. I ask for nothing for myself, for I am dead, for I am dead. All that I need is that for peace you fight today, so that the children of this world can live and grow and laugh and play.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. And if anybody wants to read those poems, the first was by Anthony Owen and the second by Nazim Hikmet. I think that's right, Emma, isn't it? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. The Reverend Gyoro Nagase of the London Peace Pagoda in Battersea, and he joins us every year to commemorate the atomic bombing of Japan and holds a ceremony in Battersea Park and lantern floating on the Thames to commemorate the bombing of Nagasaki.
This year marks the anniversary of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. This is one of the most venerable Nichidatsu Fuji, the founder of our order, Ippon Zanmyo Hoshi. Civilization is neither to have electric light, nor airplanes, not to produce nuclear bombs. Civilization is not to kill man, not to destroy things, not to make war. Civilization is to hold mutual affection and to respect each other.
Thank you very much, Reverend Rev Nagase. Well, I'm sure people don't need to be told that Rokhsana Fiaz is the directly elected mayor of Newham and a peace campaigner. And when Dicey, the biggest arms manufacturers trade fair in the world, held its biennial exhibition at the Excel Centre in Newham last year, Rokhsana hosted a Peace Day alternative event. I also attended that Dicey once, and I was told by a friend of mine, whatever you do, don't smile when you're in there, because they get it. I was deputy mayor of London at the time, and they said that's what they'd like, a photo of you looking happy at an arms fair. So I was incredibly careful. Rokhsana, can we hear from you, please?
Thank you very much, and hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And my thanks and appreciation for the kind invitation to this very, very important event to mark the 75th anniversary of the Hiroshima horror that befell the people of that city. And I don't know how many on this Zoom chat today listened to the testimony of a survivor on this morning's Radio 4 Today programme, but it was exceptionally moving and very much evoked a sense of the pain and the horror and the shock that she experienced as a young person. She was at school, she was with her close friend in a classroom, and she noted the aeroplane come in, and then the rest has been in a very devastating effect captured in our historical testimonies and footage of what befell the people of Hiroshima. So today we are here, and I am pleased to be joining all of you to mark this very important occasion. 75 years having passed of the horror, the devastation and the destruction that was done to the people of Hiroshima on the 6th of August 1945, and it lives on. Despite the fact that thousands died instantly that day, and many thousands more died subsequently from their injuries and the effects of radiation, more than 210,000 people, albeit we will never really know the true human cost suffered by the people of Hiroshima, and repeated 3 days, as we know later, in Nagasaki. And we honour and remember them all today, and it's really important that we remember them as part of our remembering of history, but also as a cautionary testimony to warn us of the threat that nuclear warfare and the nuclear industry poses to global humanity. And it absolutely forces us, rightly and justly, to be part of a global movement that is absolutely vital and necessary to ensure that what happened those 75 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki never happen again. Sadly, however, as you all know, the call for nuclear disarmament is as desperately needed today as it ever has been in a world full of tension and instability. We know that the United States and Russia have withdrawn from the arms control agreements in recent years, and we are really now approaching a dangerous precipice. I know that the calculation is that we're some 100 seconds away from a nuclear disaster in terms of that clock that has been established to keep us on our toes. But it appears that despite the efforts and in the endeavours of the global peace movement and campaigners, including many of us involved in CND, either here in the UK or internationally, are falling on deaf ears when it comes to those powers, global powers, that have the real power to be able to mitigate against the risk of nuclear impact on humanity. And at a time when the people of the world are already dealing with the devastating impact and the social and economic uncertainty that has befallen us as a consequence of a natural catastrophe, climate emergency, COVID-19, we are allowing ourselves, well, we aren't, but we are needing to stop the man-made catastrophe. And that's why I am proud to be with all of you here today. I'm proud to be joining you in taking a stand that says very clearly and loudly that we will continue to rally together as a global community, as a movement that requires us to also ensure that we start at the local. And that's what we're doing here in Newham, as was alluded to. You know, I'm really pleased that we've been in opposition to the arms fair that takes place every 2 years, and I'm hopeful that the next planned one won't happen. But also pleased our last full virtual council last month in July, we passed a motion which declared our support for the 2017 United Nations Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and calling on the UK government to work for global denuclearisation. Inevitably, I've already got some calls from local residents, you know, why are you promoting this when, you know, there are more pressing issues locally? And my argument is that it's absolutely necessary that we link the local with the international, that our stand against nuclear proliferation is equally important for the people of Newham because of the, you know, seismic challenge and threat that it poses. And I'm also pleased that following the adoption and passing of the motion, I'm going to be affiliating to the Mears for Peace network, and I will be joining as a representative of Newham, the global community of over 7,900 cities across 164 countries and regions around the world. And we will be playing our part in ensuring that we not only remember all victims of nuclear weapons and the devastation that it causes, that we also play our role and add our voice to the call to ensure that the threat of nuclear ends and stops the anxiety and the threat that it poses to humanity. And creating a focus of remembrance here in Newham, as I am doing today and in future years, is a symbol of our determination and the vision of Mears for Peace, of a world free of nuclear weapons, so that no one else should ever have to suffer like the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so we join with everyone on this call and all over the world in stating very loudly and very clearly, no more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki. Thank you.
Rokhsana, thank you very much indeed. And that's excellent news about Newham joining Mayors for Peace. That's really good. It has to be an elected mayor, and Ken Livingstone was in fact the first mayor of London, and he did sign up to Mayors for Peace. I think Boris didn't really like the idea, so it didn't happen then, unfortunately. And I'm sure that nobody needs to be told who he is. He's a former leader of the Labour Party, also Vice President of CND and a member of London CND. And he's with us today. I think he was with us last year as well. And it will be very good to hear from him now.
I'm here today in the Philip Noel Baker Peace Garden in my constituency. This was opened in the 1980s by Bruce and others in memory of Philip Noel Baker, and Fenner Brockway was here as well. And this beautiful garden, which I'm in with a lot of friends this morning, is a peace garden, and the plaque in front of me is in memory of those that died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And behind me is one of the cherry trees we planted in memory of those people that lost their lives at that time. This garden is maintained by volunteers and is improving all the time, and I'm very proud it's in my constituency. Today, we're commemorating those that died in 1945, when that first nuclear weapon was unleashed on the people of Hiroshima. It wasn't militarily necessary or morally right that it was used at that time. It unleashed a Cold War. It unleashed an arms race, which cost the world trillions of dollars, pounds, rubles, whatever, in developing yet greater weapons of mass destruction. And those weapons of mass destruction are still with us. In memory of those that died in 1945 and those that have died from nuclear testing ever since, and all the money that could have been spent on social causes that wasn't, because the world was obsessed with developing yet more nuclear weapons. Let's think very, very hard about what we can do. The issues facing the world today are obviously the corona crisis, which has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and threatens the lives of many, many more. The world is threatened with an environmental disaster as global warming damages the polar ice caps, both north and south, and damages the natural world of people in between. The world is dominated by a refugee crisis of 65 million people with no home to call their own. And the world is in danger from random terrorist attacks as a result of the illegal wars that we've fought. Surely, now, in 2020, let's think again about the kind of world we could have. And if we weren't spending all these resources on nuclear weapons, if we weren't building up the terror of nuclear weapons around the world, then the world would actually be a much safer place. In the 1960s, the world had the vision at the height of the Cold War of passing the Non-Proliferation Treaty into law. That nuclear non-proliferation treaty requires all member states that signed it not to develop or hold nuclear weapons, and all those that did have nuclear weapons at that time and still do, to take steps towards disarmament. This year, because of the corona crisis, the NPT review conference has been postponed to next year. And likewise, the review of Britain's strategic defence is also being undertaken, but again, is being delayed slightly because of coronavirus. Let's do two things. Let's contribute to that defence review, that strategic defence review in Britain, and look at a way that we can put the resources and the skills of those that currently make nuclear weapons into better use, but protect their jobs and their communities at the same time? And can we also make our contributions, the NPT review, which is that Britain would be a country that would take steps towards disarmament, not developing a new generation of nuclear weapons. There are reports that Britain is now lobbying the USA for yet another generation of nuclear weapons. Surely, if we've learned nothing over the past 6 months of the corona crisis, it is that the world needs resources to be dedicated towards the health needs of everybody. The world needs resources to be dedicated towards protecting our natural world and biodiversity. And the world needs resources to deal with the problems that people face. Nuclear weapons cannot protect us from corona, cannot save the environment, cannot even help the poor people of Beirut who are struggling through the mess of a terrible explosion a few days ago. In memory of those that lost their lives so needlessly in 1945, let's dedicate ourselves to peace for the future. Dedicate ourselves to the memory of those that lost their lives, and to build a world free of nuclear weapons, and a world where a park like this beautiful park, can be seen as something that, in memory of those, made its contribution to encouraging people to reflect on a better world that I believe is possible. And all on this call, all on this Zoom, all over the world, passionately believe it's possible. Raise your voices for peace. Raise your voices for the environment, for people, but not for war. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, thank you very much. I feel I should be clapping as well. Thank you. It's very good to see you in the garden. Most of us can't be there, so it's fantastic that you were able to be there with some people from your constituency. Thank you. That brings our meeting to an end. And apart from another musical interlude from Hugh Goodacre, I would like to thank the various people who've contributed today, to London CND, obviously, for organising, and Carol Turner for being a wonderful slim controller of the whole thing. Also to Hannah Kemp-Welsh, who's helped coordinate this event and done all the technical wizardry, and she's curated a wonderful online exhibition for Nagasaki Day. Thank you too to all of our participants, our contributors. It was very moving and very powerful. And thank you too to our audience who have actually taken time today to remember these terrible events and who spend their time actually trying to prevent it ever happening again. And of course, to all the survivors, the Hibaksha, who have given us so much in terms of the moral backbone to carry on with our fight with this challenge. And so finally, I would like to introduce Hugh Goodacre again, who is going to give us some more music. Hugh.
Hi. Well, I found this old book, CND book, Songs for Peace, which illustrates the enormous range of different types of music that have been drafted into use for the cause. So I'm not going to actually sing any song. I'll just sing a line or two from each one to remind people of this. 3 Bob Dylan songs. How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And now they've got weapons of chemical dust. If fire them we're forced to, then fire them we must. One push of the button and a blast the world wide. 'Cause we never ask questions when God's on our side. Masters of war who hide behind walls and hide behind desks. You've thrown the worst fear that can ever be held. The fear to bring children into their world. For threatening my baby, unborn and unnamed. You ain't worth the blood that flows in your veins. All the money you've made will never buy back your souls. John Lennon, of course. Imagine there's no countries. I wonder if you can. Nothing to kill or die for. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Country Joe and the Fish, anyone remember that? And it's 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next up is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7, open up the pearly gates. There ain't no time to wonder why we're all gonna die. What else we got? Fallout shelters, supposed to make us feel a lot safer. There's a blue one, and the pink one, and the pink one, and the yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all burn just the same. The instructions from the government sound a bit like the kind of thing we get today. It's supposed to stand firm. Stand firm. aggressor, that free men will be free. Crouch down in your hidey holes, make lots of pots of tea. If you're caught out in the open, hide behind a tree. Stand firm, stand firm. Nuclear waste, lots of suitable places in Scotland, nice Cheviot Hills. Oh, we're the nuclear dustmen with all our nuclear waste. We don't know where to put it, nine but the disgrace. We take it off to China, we've tried the pole, but we'll take it to the Cheviots and we'll stick it down the hole. And some words of reassurance for parents worried about their daughters marching up and down the country unchaperoned. Oh, mother, don't flap, there's no need for distress. That marcher has given me his name and address. And if we do win, no, a baby there be, well, he won't have to march like his daddy and me. God rest ye merry gentlemen, sleep easy in your bed. The independent British bomb is flying overhead to go and kill the Russians when the rest of us are dead. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. Too bad if we astound you, rich and wealthy. Having your sort around just isn't healthy. Masters of War, that's a bit more English than Bob Dylan's version, isn't it? And the independent, no need to tell CND, the independent British bomb was, in Bruce's words, totally dependent. Once a cabal, deep in Whitehall, hid from Parliament and Queen, and decided to provide it deadly secret Cheveling. One of the defence ministers at that time was called John Knott. Oh, we're not having bunkers, and we're not having Cheveling. Having John Knott as a US go-between. So goodbye, Maggie Thatcher, farewell Reagan too, 'cause we're not having any missiles, and we're not having you. No cruise missiles wanted here today. No cruise missiles wanted here today, because one cruise missile could accidentally spray. There'd be no more people left around to stay. Oh, we should have learned by now that nuclear bombs are no defense. We should have learned by now that nuclear bombs are no defense. We should have learned by now that nuclear bombs are no defense, but the arms race still goes on. Trident, what an insane idea. We can't afford medication or proper education, but we must pay $1 million a day so that Britain can disappear. But they still find millions to spend on war. Same now, same then. So our schools can't buy their children books. They sack the cleaners, they sack the cooks, and we're told by conmen and by crooks we must all do without, 'cause we have to. H-bomb flying so fast. We don't want to feed your past. Never matter where or how, we're gonna bang you down. We're gonna ban cruise missiles, we shall not be moved. We're gonna ban cruise missiles, we shall not be moved. It's like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Singing no cruise missiles wanted here. Singing no cruise missiles wanted here. If the missiles come to Greenham, then they'll wish we hadn't seen them. And there's no cruise those missiles wanted here. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down that atom bomb down by the riverside, and I ain't gonna study war no more. Well, that shows the range of kinds of music just in that one little book. Traditional songs, folk songs, protest songs, carols and hymns, music hall, nursery rhymes, rock, skiffle and soul. You've had an example of all of them. Thanks and acknowledgements: John Brunner, Campaign Atom, Joan Horrocks, Sally Reid, Koki Kinoshita, Tony Pappard, Glasgow University's Political Song Collection, Ewan McCall and Leon Rosselson. And finally, just for Hiroshima Day, adapted from the Japanese. In the place where our city was destroyed, where we gathered the ashes of the ones that we loved, there the green grass grows and the wild waving weeds. Deadly the harvest of 2 atom bombs. People of the world, you must watch and take care that the 3rd atom bomb never comes. So there we are. Men and women stand together